Here's part two. I guess I'll probably edit these together at some point. So we get all the wires exposed. I actually I'm going to cut the yellow wire off. I already cut it. I was just putting it back just to show that I was going to cut it. I don't know why I did that. But, so I'm just going to put that one off to the side. Now I just have the pink, the green, the blue for the video. And then we have the red and white. And they're conveniently marked with the black stripe, so we know what they are. And then on this one, the video is actually, this would be the pink and yellow go together. I double checked to make sure by checking the cord that I cut and put off to the side. This is actually the red wire for the video side, and this would be the white wire for the sound, and then the red is the sound red wire. And then you have the ground wire, the black one, and of course the blue and green video wires. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip these back, and I'm going to also put some heat shrink on them over the end, just so I can pull it back over and enclose the wire connection after I solder it and twist it and everything to make a good solid connection. So I've pulled all the grounding, the sheathing back, the shielding, and then I also have the other shielding kind of just sitting there. So I'm going to cut these in, I'm not sure how, maybe like a fingernail length, or just a small section that I can use to cover the wire, and then set these off to the side. So I need 5 of them. So I'm using the 332 size because it'll allow for a nice fold of the wire. And then of course just hit it with the lighter and shrink it down when you're done. So the idea is I'll start with the sound part of the wires. And you're just going to pop them on there. I kept forgetting to do this, and it's kind of tedious when you forget. I suppose you can use electrical tape, but these are smaller. And we're trying to stuff it all back into that cord, and the tighter our tolerances can be, the more room we're going to have to play with. So I'm using heat shrink to keep it as tight a fit as possible. And for this, the good old trusty Klein strippers would work on the thicker wire, but on the thinner wire, these particular wire strippers that I have don't go small enough, so I have to use the lighter to get those ends off. It's kind of barbaric, but it is what it is. So we'll take the red and the white first. And I'm just going to take a decent amount, and you might want to cut it back just a tad. I left it this long because the black wire, you really want the black wire to be that long, because you're going to wrap it around. But for these ones, maybe just an inch or two, and then just cut them back to that point and give you enough space to wrap, because you still have to fold those wires inside the case, so you don't have a lot of room to work with. So you got to be careful, because you got to imagine all that wire, once I have this on the shielding, all that wire is going to have to fit in there. So you need as much space as you can possibly get. So cutting back on these wires is probably the easiest thing to do, but leave yourself enough to get a good end to twist. So I usually, let's say about 2 inches, 2.5 inches or something, and then just cut those two back. Then give yourself I use my fingers as reference, my fingernail. They're like a fingernail on my thumb right there. Just that amount. Kind of give it a little toast and a twist. So if you toast it and twist it, that really thin wire in there gets mostly preserved, but you got to make sure and melt all the plastic off. So I'm doing it multiple times, and then you can check it for continuity if you want to, but I can see that there's a nice clean end there, and it's nice and twisted, and you know, you just kind of hit it a couple times with the lighter to make sure. I realize I'm probably speaking to the choir, but if you've never done this kind of wiring stuff before, preaching to the choir, I mean, but I like being thorough, especially with explanations. So these wires on the 360 cable are actually thick enough to strip with my particular wire strippers without fraying those ends. You got to be careful because the wire is so thin. But after I've spun them, I get a little bit of solder ready. So I just made the connection on the first two set of wires that I'm gonna go ahead and hit them with a little bit of solder. I twisted them together really well, and there's making sure the connection is not longer than the heat shrink that I cut, so I can then fold it and put it back over and shrink it on to make a nice solid connection. And go and fire up the soldering iron. And then just tap it really quick to solidify that connection, just in case, you know, the pulling and jarring of moving around the console or something doesn't undo those ends. And I don't want to put too much solder though, because again we're working with limited space. So I'll just kind of get it hot and kind of wipe it up the wire to kind of braid it in and thread it in there. Give it a little bit stronger connection. See, that one didn't quite stick together, so kind of threads itself together. Pretty cool. That part is good. So we've got a good connection. Of course, we can double check it if we wanted to by testing the pins and the continuity, but I'm pretty confident in my connection. I'll check them anyway before I close everything up. But then I just take the wire and fold it back. So you get the spliced and soldered bit. Then I just kind of fold it back in and pull the heat shrink over it to cover that connection, and repeat the process with this one. So that one has a nice connection, nice and sturdy. I'll just cover it with the heat shrink, and I'm sure there's a more elegant method, but you got to be careful because the component cable, the wires are so thin that they melt through really fast. So I just kind of new to this heat shrink thing, but it seems like if you just feather your flame on it and then kind of give it a little squeeze, it covers that connection pretty well. Shrinks down as its name would suggest. Now we have a pretty sturdy connection. So the connection will be reinforced when we get it inside the clip, because we're going to clamp it down on the exterior of the cord in the metal part. But this would be ideal to have these connected. So I'm just going to repeat that process for all 5 wires, and then I'll get to the other part in part 3, I guess. So just rinse and repeat with the next 3 wires and the heat shrink and the shielding. So I'll jump past that part and go on into the final stages with my next part of the video.